So I'm going to start this video by making it absolutely clear that I cannot pronounce most of the names that will be in this video. It's not because I haven't tried to learn the pronunciations, it's just that some of them are difficult to say. So what I will do is try to say a shorter version of their names to save myself the embarrassment. Anyway, with that out of the way, today we'll be covering the story and lore of every member in the Kanien'keha, starting with the members found in Assassin's Creed Valhalla and ending with Connor's daughter in the comic titled Assassin's Creed Reflections Issue 4. I just quickly want to say a big thank you to my channel members. Your support is greatly appreciated and it helps out tremendously. With all that said, let us get started. Very little is known about Konwa and Karon's childhood, but by adulthood they seemed to hold a leadership role among the Kanien'keha. In 875 they encountered Anvil of the Raven clan, who had sailed from England to their village in search of Gorm Kjotveson. At first, the meeting between Konwa, Karon and Anvil went nowhere. Neither of the village leaders spoke Saxon or Norse, and Anvil didn't understand any of their language. But when Sunin landed calmly on Anvil's arm, Konwa's suspicions eased and Karon followed her lead. Seeing that Anvil meant no harm, Konwa guided her to the village waterfall, where the seer known to the people of Nyhofen as Olav the Unlucky was being held. After introducing the two, she quietly took her leave. Later, after finishing her own account, Konwa listened as Anvil shared a tale of Loki's betrayal and the death of Balder. When the story ended, she and Karon spoke with Anvil, who revealed the crystal ball she had taken from Gorm. Konwa accepted the artifact for safekeeping, hoping that the Kanien'keha would one day uncover its true purpose. Not long after, Konwa and Karon said their goodbyes as Anvil departed for home. Oyene, the clan mother, was the leader of the Kanien'keha village of Kanen'to. She and the other villagers acted as guardians of the sacred land on which both their settlement and the Grand Temple stood. Oyene also served as the keeper of the village's crystal ball. In 1769, after Connor returned from a hunt, Oyene showed him the crystal ball and allowed him to interact with it. The artifact pulled him into the Nexus, where he spoke with Juno and learned about his future with the assassins. Over the following years, Connor would occasionally return to the village to speak with the clan mother. They discussed his travels, the death of William Johnson, and the village's position during the American Revolutionary War. By 1778, although the village had tried to remain neutral, it faced the threat of destruction once again. Charles Lee manipulated Kanen'to and several other Kanien'keha men into attacking the Continental soldiers who came near the village. When Connor arrived to stop the conflict, Oyene told him what Lee had done. Sometime later, Oyene spoke with Connor again and revealed her plan to lead their people west, away from the war, as many other nations had already done. Connor reacted poorly to the news, but she stood firm, saying she would do whatever was best for her people. Connor left the village in frustration, and when he returned years later, he found it abandoned, aside from a lone frontiersman who explained that the villagers had already moved west. Ziio was born to Oyene in 1731 and she was raised from an early age to one day take her place as the clan mother. As she grew up, she often voiced her concerns about the colonists pushing deeper into Kanien'keha territory, even though the village had agreed to remain neutral. At some point in her life, she also formed a friendship with Achilles Davenport. In 1754, before the French and Indian War fully unfolded, Ziio was captured along with several members of her people and personally delivered to the slaver Silas Thatcher. While being transported through Boston towards Southgate Fort, their convoy was attacked by Haytham Kenway and his fellow Templars. Their goal was to assassinate Silas and free the captives, hoping to use the act as leverage to gain information about the sanctuary of Ziio's nation. Once inside the fort, the Templars freed the prisoners and Ziio led her people to safety. As they escaped, she gave Haytham a brief, grateful smile. Later, Haytham decided she could be a valuable asset in regards to the search for the precursor site, since the Kanien'keha regarded the precursors as sacred beings. He expected her people to reach out in thanks for the rescue, but weeks passed without any word. That winter, Ziio began scouting the town of Lexington after learning that Edward Braddock and his troops were stationed there, and intended to drive her people from their land. Her movements caught the attention of Charles Lee, which led both him and Haytham to track her down near the town. By the time they reached her camp, Ziio had already moved on. When they finally caught up, she slipped into the trees, forcing Haytham to chase her until she stopped and allowed him to speak. After they introduced themselves, Haytham showed her the amulet he had taken in London. Ziio admitted that she had seen similar markings before, but she refused to say where, as the place was sacred. To earn her trust, Haytham offered to help her assassinate Braddock. Though still wary, Ziio agreed. The two travelled to a tavern in Concord, where they eavesdropped on several redcoats and learned that Braddock was stationed at Fort St. Matthew. As they left, the soldiers confronted Haytham, which caused a bar fight. After the scuffle, Ziio treated a small cut on his cheek with a cloth soaked in alcohol. Though he insisted it wasn't necessary, Haytham thanked her anyway. Sometime later, Ziio met Haytham outside Fort St. Matthew, where he managed to steal military plans revealing Braddock's route to Fort Duquesne. Over the following months, Ziio prepared an ambush, gathering support from like-minded warriors among the neighbouring tribes in order to strike at Braddock's expedition. In July of 1755, Ziio met with Haytham and her native allies in the frontier. When panic broke out among Braddock's expedition, her warriors launched their attack. During the chaos, Ziio rushed in to help Haytham, tackling and pinning down George Washington. This gave Haytham the opening he needed to pursue Braddock and strike him down, leaving the general mortally wounded. With his part of the bargain seemingly complete, Ziio led Haytham to the entrance of the Grand Temple. However, the amulet that he carried showed no reaction. Noticing his disappointment, Ziio told him the story behind the cave paintings and the sacred gods they represented. As she held his hand, the two confessed their feelings and shared a kiss. They would meet again afterward, and from that union, their son would be conceived. Their relationship eventually fell apart when Ziio learned that Haytham hadn't actually killed Braddock as promised. A month after the attack, Charles Lee informed Haytham that Braddock had died from his injuries and had been buried by Washington. Feeling deceived and used, Ziio angrily ordered Haytham to leave. Ziio returned to her village and raised her son among her people. Because of her role in the attack on Braddock's expedition, an action that went against the elders' wishes, she was denied the chance to become clan mother. In time, she also discovered the truth about Haytham's ties to the Templars and their true ambitions. This filled her with fear that Connor might one day follow in his father's footsteps. She also worried that the villagers might reject him because of his mixed heritage. But those fears proved unfounded. The community embraced him as one of their own, much to her relief. In 1760, Ziio allowed Connor to go into the forest to play with the other children. Around the same time, Charles Lee and several Templars came to the village, demanding access to the spirit sanctuary. They were refused and left, but unknown to Ziio, Lee had encountered Connor in the woods and assaulted him for his own amusement. Soon after, soldiers under George Washington's command attacked the village. During the assault, Ziio became trapped beneath rubble inside a burning hut. Connor returned and tried desperately to free her, but he couldn't move the debris. Realising she wouldn't survive, Ziio urged him to run before he was killed too. He refused and kept trying to save her until a village elder carried him away to safety, forcing him to leave her behind. Ziio's final words to her son were ones of comfort and love, spoken just before the hut collapsed and took her life. She died on 2nd of November 1760 at only 29 years old. Kanen'to was born in 1756. When he was 4 years old, he joined Connor and the other children in the village to play some games in the nearby forest. While they were playing hide and seek, Charles Lee and several Templars arrived at the village, hoping to force the elders into revealing the location of the Grand Temple. They left empty-handed, but not long after, the village was destroyed under orders from George Washington during the French and Indian War. As a teenager, Kanen'to trained with Connor, learning how to move through the forest, gather materials and hunt. Not long after, Connor grew worried that the colonists would return to claim their land and set out on his own quest to protect the village. Kanen'to stayed behind in the valley, doing his part to keep their people safe and neutral, while tensions grew between the colonists and the British loyalists. In 1773, Kanen'to travelled to the Davenport homestead to find Connor. He told him that William Johnson had received permission from the Iroquois Confederacy to buy their land and force the villagers to relocate. Realising that diplomacy would no longer work, Kanen'to handed Connor a hatchet. Connor drove it into one of the manor's pillars, a symbolic act that marked the beginning of war according to their customs. Connor soon travelled to Boston, where he took part in the Boston Tea Party and destroyed a shipment of British tea that Johnson had been smuggling for profit. Despite this setback, Johnson returned 6 months later, having secured the funds through other means. Kanen'to brought this news back to the homestead, prompting Connor to hunt Johnson down and assassinate him. As the American Revolutionary War intensified, Kanen'to began to fear that the Continental Army would eventually seize their village. At the same time, the British were offering protection and promise of independence for their lands if the Kanien'keha allied with them. During one of Connor's visits to the village, Kanen'to shared this with him, but Connor strongly urged him not to take sides, insisting that people needed to stay neutral. By 1778, Charles Lee approached Kanen'to and claimed that George Washington's Continental Army planned to destroy the village because of its supposed ties to the British. He also convinced him that Connor had betrayed his own people by siding with Washington. Believing this, Kanen'to finally chose to join the conflict, hoping to keep the Continental forces away from their land. He led a group of Kanien'keha warriors out of the village to scout and strike at the approaching army. Before they could engage, Connor intervened and knocked the warriors unconscious, trying to keep the village from being dragged into the war. Connor then caught up with Kanen'to and the two confronted each other. Kanen'to accused his former friend of being corrupted by the Continental Army and betraying their people. Connor tried to reason with him, explaining that Charles Lee had manipulated him and twisted the truth. Kanen'to refused to listen and attacked. He pinned Connor to the ground, holding a knife close to his throat. With no other option, Connor used his hidden blade to stab his friend in the neck, killing him in self-defense. With his dying breath, Kanen'to said the Continental Army would be defeated at Monmouth by the British, believing that this outcome would secure the future of their people. Sometime in the 1780s, Connor married a woman from a nearby tribe, and together they had 3 children, a son and 2 daughters. In April of 1796, he took his daughter nhiote far from her mother's village to teach her how to track and hunt. Although her tribe didn't really train women in those skills, Connor believed that she was different. Out of his 3 children, she was the only one who seemed to possess the gift. While tracking a deer, nhiote became careless and slipped off a small drop, spraining her ankle. Connor left her resting where she was and went down to the river to find cold water to reduce the swelling. While he was gone, nhiote spotted fresh wolf tracks nearby and tried to warn him, but he was too far away to hear her. Looking up in fear, she noticed an eagle circling overhead. Somehow, in her distress, she formed a connection with the bird. The eagle flew toward Connor and let out a sharp cry just as a wolf lunged at him, while he knelt down by the stream. Connor killed the animal with the hidden blade and saw that it had gone mad from an infected musket wound. When he returned to his daughter, who was surprised to learn that she already knew about the encounter, she had seen it through the eagle's eyes. Realizing the depth of her abilities, Connor understood that he had a great deal to teach her. Atasa, also known as Chogun or Kryn, was of Kanien'keha descent and was raised away from his people by his assassin father. From a young age, he was trained in the art of killing, using those skills primarily as a means of survival. He lived a quiet, hidden life until his father was slain by a Templar raiding party. After that, he wandered through cities under Templar control, constantly searching for an opportunity to take revenge. I again want to express my thanks to my channel members, as your support is greatly appreciated and it helps out a ton. Anyway, thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'm sorry for the mispronunciations.